Hi, guys. Shawn and I have some exciting news. We have created official Twitter and Instagram accounts for the Oh Mr. Sheffield podcast. It is at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on both platforms, and that is Oh Mr. Chef with 2 Fs. So Oh Mr. Chef Pod. Check it out. Follow us. It's going to have all the latest and greatest from us about this show, and we hope you like it.
Now enjoy the episode.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
And now the father's finally gone. Watch out, Cece.
Woo!
And the kids are finally smiling, so joie de vivre. All right. All right.
Definitely leave this in.
That's how she became a nanny.
I want this to be my wedding song.
I want it to be my wedding song too, but we're going to be marrying different people. and then if we're stay friends and we invite those people with us to the other person's wedding, they'll be like, wait a minute, you use the same wedding song. So
now it's a race to the altar.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Oh Mr. Sheffield with your co-hosts, Shawn Pasquale and Toria Sheffield.
Hello.
That's
Welcome
Toria.
back.
I'm Shawn. That's Toria, just to be clear.
Yeah.
And so today we are here to discuss episode 5 of The Nanny. Here comes The Nanny season 1, and the episode is called Here Comes the Brood, which is, of course, a play on Here Comes the Bride, right?
Yes. And this is the episode where Cece takes the kids to the zoo and then Gracie runs away to see Fran in Flushing.
Yeah.
And it's on Fran's day off.
Yes. And this episode was written by Diane Wilk, is credited as the writer on this episode. And she, I took a peep at some of her credits. She's like, she was a TV writer. She wrote one episode of Herman's Head, which if there's ever another TV rewatch podcast that I do, it's going to be Herman's Head.
Shawn, I am not kidding you. Right after this, go to my Facebook wall and look at what my older brother wrote on the first post I did about this. He said, your next podcast should be about Herman's Head.
Oh my God. Well, okay. I guess that's what we're doing next, Herman's Head. But yeah, so she wrote an episode of Herman's Head, which if you haven't seen it, that's a whole different podcast, which we'll get into, I guess.
You can do it with another Sheffield. You can do it with Kit Sheffield.
No, that one I'm going to co-host with Fran Drescher.
Oh, really mix it up. Really throw people for a tailspin.
So she wrote, looks like 16 episodes of The Nanny. And then she wrote Living with Fran, which I believe was the follow-up sitcom that was just about Fran Drescher, though. It wasn't about like the nanny character, right?
Oh, I don't know. You're actually hitting me with some new knowledge. I didn't even dig that deep.
Oh, yeah, no. Living with Fran was like, it was not about the same character. She played a character named Fran Reeves, and it was like a different thing, but she loves playing people named Fran.
Well, Lucille Ball had there was I Love Lucy, and then I think I remember there was a different, it wasn't I Love Lucy, but she was like Lucy in like a different series, and unfortunately it just never packs the same punch as the first. It's like when Dana Carvey did his spin-off sketch show. You want it to be what you know, and then they try to be a little different, and it doesn't work.
I love the Dana Carvey sketch show, though.
That's a third podcast we got to do.
No one else loved it, but it was a great show.
That's our third podcast.
So this episode was, I liked it.
I was going to say, it seems like we kind of had some conflicting feelings on this one, because my first note is really solid episode, too many good lines to count. And right before we started recording, Shawn, you informed me that you were like, meh, you were okay with it.
Yeah, so my note by the end was just okay first half, much better second half.
Interesting. Well,
so yeah.
I guess we're gonna have to sort of dissect
let's
this.
break it down.
We gotta break this down. Really, just dig in.
Yeah.
Because I literally wrote great setup. Cece like the beginning of the episode starts with basically Cece coming over, and she witnesses Fran getting the family ready for their day. And it was just to me, a really fun scene. Like Fran's in her bathrobe, she's holding a mug of coffee, and she's like lining the kids up, and she's like, Brighton, good luck on your math test. Maggie, like, oof, let me take that headband off. And it's like literally she's so familiar with this family that she turns around to Mr. Sheffield and like they almost kiss each other goodbye, which is like, in this just very like much an indicator of where they are right now. And they kind of like jump away from each other. And I think also in that scene, she's like, oh, you got some schmutz on your face. And she licks her, tissue and rubs it on his face. So we really get this insight into their comfort level as like a little family unit now.
Is schmutz the Yiddish word of the week?
It is. I did record it down.
Yeah, same.
So I think it's the only Yiddish word in this episode.
Same. Yeah. So should we do that? We should talk about what schmutz is.
Well, we can, and I actually I gave this one a little flair this week because I figured that everyone's already heard schmutz, and that's another softball. So let me go to our Yiddish phrase. It comes up pretty early in the ep. So it's schmutz, which means dirt, filth, or grime.
Yeah, schmutz. You got a little schmutz on you.
Mm-hmm. And the little extra fact I added in was apparently the English language has been particularly receptive to earthy terms from Yiddish. So things that are sort of like dirt or ground or grass. And I didn't really look into what other words those would be, but apparently English has absorbed those words from Yiddish pretty well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I always like that stuff, sort of like what we've taken from German and French and how it all becomes this weird hodgepodge.
Yiddish has a lot of yenta, and it's got a lot of words that don't really sound like English words. But schmutz, aside from maybe the TZ at the end there, those sounds are used a lot in the English language. So it kind of makes sense to me that word would be more easily assimilated into language than maybe words that have less commonly used consonants.
I am not a linguist, and I will never pretend to be. So I can only say that sounds right to me. And I felt like I learned something new this week when I read that.
That's fascinating.
But yeah, so first scene is Cece witnessing Fran just being so familiar and comfortable with the Sheffields, and it instantly makes her feel threatened. And so sort of the central drive of this episode is in an attempt to try to prove to Mr. Sheffield that she's also great with kids and would be a great wife. She says, I want to go to the zoo tomorrow with you. It'll be a family day. And what ends up happening is Mr. Sheffield gets a toothache and he can't go, which means Cece has to take the kids to the zoo herself on Fran's day off. So that's the main plot, the A plot. And then there's this B plot that Fran on her day off is going to be a bridesmaid at her cousin's wedding.
Yes.
Which we can get into that because it's all going to tie together eventually.
That's where the episode eventually culminates. Is at the wedding. Yeah.
Yes. Well, because what happens is the kids go to the zoo with Cece and it's a total disaster. And it actually ends with them saying how much they love Fran and how much Fran is better than Cece. And she loses it and basically says the only reason Fran spends time with you is because she's paid to.
Right.
And this causes Maggie to run out, or not Maggie, Gracie to run out really upset, which leads us to sort of where this episode really gets going, about halfway through. And basically Fran is in her parents' apartment. They're getting ready to head out to this wedding reception. And Fran's wearing this completely absurd, hilarious dress. It's it's like the most like grotesque thing you've ever seen. It's very, very what's the word? Very tacky. And it's like she and her mom.
Yeah, it's like that's like the hot pink dress with the giant like bows all the way down it, or like flowers all the way down it.
Yes.
It is I would describe it as garish. It is garish.
And don't you think this was such a great scene though with her mom when they're getting ready? Because like the best part is, so, you know, she's trying to zip her mom up into this dress and she's like, Mom, I'm not sure about these. Yes.
This ill-fitting, very tight dress that the mother is clearly like not the right. It's not the right size dress for the mom. It's like a size too small, you know. And so she's like, she's like crammed into it like a sausage casing, and it's got all these straps in the back.
And the thing is, Fran's like, I'm not sure about these straps. You look like a ham. And the mom goes, the sales girl said I looked like a dream. And Fran goes, maybe Oscar Myers.
Yeah, and then the mom goes, I hope she chokes on her commission. Which, right out of my grandma's mouth. I hope she chokes on her commission.
Yeah, and then like I truly had a laugh out moment when Fran's mom goes, oh, it's almost 6 o'clock. You got to comb your father's hair. At which point Fran grabs a toupee and starts combing it out. And they're arguing over like which way to part the toupee based on like which eye is smaller on her father's face. It was just like, it was a very funny scene. We kind of get this slice of life into like Fran's world in Queens. At which point there's this knock on the door and it's Gracie, who has run away from home after this horrible day at the zoo with Cece.
In a limo. She says, I ran away to the limo, and then the limo took her here.
Yeah, I think there was some line where, she said, I ran away, I took the limo. And Fran goes, when I ran away, I took a banana.
Yeah.
And she also said, who runs away from Park Avenue to Flushing? He ran in the wrong direction. You know, and it's just set up really, you know, right at this point that clearly Gracie has this very strong emotional connection with Fran, and that's sort of who she runs to when she's feeling upset. But it creates this situation where now obviously this 7-year-old is no longer in her home and is missing.
So there's a couple of things before we go into like the second half of this episode. So like it's interesting how Cece's jealousy becomes like very clear in this episode. She's like obviously very jealous of Fran, but like I think the show kind of solidifies her in this episode as like she is not good with kids and she doesn't really like these kids, and that basically just makes her interested in Maxwell's like life and money. Like I don't think that she's in love with Maxwell. I don't think you can be. I don't know. It doesn't. To me, it doesn't track that she like genuinely is in love with him and everything about his life. She just like wants to be with this powerful person who has money. And like, she sees herself as having put this time and work in. And so she like deserves it. But like, she sucks and she's like mean. And like, this episode does not do her any favors in the sense that like, it doesn't make her seem like, oh, maybe she is a good match for Maxwell. She's clearly not. And like, this just, I think, solidifies her as that. So I found that interesting that they don't really, I don't really remember if eventually they soften her and kind of make her like maybe a possible competition to Fran. But like right now, she's just a foil. She doesn't come off as a threat at all.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a love triangle by any means. Like, know it, but that's very sitcom-y. Like, that's her role. She is the person to make Fran look better and the person for us to like collectively laugh at and dislike. It's certainly not like, I don't think at this point, episode 5, we're under like no illusion that Mr. Sheffield might end up with Cece. It's just, it's fun to laugh at her like trying and failing.
Yes. The other thing is, and I don't know if this happened to you, but I ended this episode and I went, oh, who played Fran's dad? And then I went back and I was like, wait, do we never actually meet Fran's dad? I thought we met him because they talk about him. And like, it turns out you don't actually ever meet Fran's dad in this episode, even though he's mentioned multiple times as if he's there. And I thought that was really interesting that like you never see this guy. Like he's off screen getting ready in the apartment, and then they go to the wedding. And at one point she goes, she screams. She's like, Morty, get over here and meet them. And then they're like exchange some more dialogue. And then she goes, I got to go bring Morty a plate. And she like walks off, and they never address why he didn't walk over there. Like,
so wait,
did you notice that?
Do we meet? I did notice that. And I had that same thought where I was like, I wonder if it's one of those things where it's like, we never actually see him on screen, but we do is what you're saying. We will. Eventually.
I don't know if we do. I don't know.
I for some reason, maybe
I didn't want to Google it because I was like, oh, I wonder if this is like a running gag, like that they never actually show her dad for whatever reason. I wonder if they just hadn't cast him yet. I mean, there's a lot of extras in this episode at the party. So it's like, I can see from a sitcom budgeting perspective where you're like, it's fine. We'll get to him later,
Yeah. And well, so this leads to, Fran calls Mr. Sheffield and is, basically informs him
wait. One more thing I forgot in that last chunk of scenes we discussed is we missed right before Gracie shows up at the house. They're like getting ready to go. And her mom goes, get me my shoes. And Fran crosses to the freezer and opens the freezer and pulls her shoes out. And she's like, Mom, I don't understand why you just can't wear real leather shoes. And she's like, these are better and my feet sweat less in them.
Or no, it's they're cheap, which make her feet sweat, which is why she puts them in the freezer.
In the freezer, right. Have you done that before? Is that a thing? I've never seen anyone do that before. Is that a thing people did?
I had never seen it before. But I don't know if it's a real thing. It seems like it would be very painful and uncomfortable. But he definitely, just like leans into these are not they're not a classy family.
Right. Right. And then when Gracie shows up, I just kind of jotted down that because you've brought it up on the previous couple of episodes. This is one of the first episodes where we kind of see what this show could have been in a world where the oldest sister didn't exist. And I think we actually get a run of them, because we've watched a couple ahead of this recording. I think we actually get kind of a run of a look of that, of like, what is the show without the teenage daughter sort of being the story like engine. And a lot of it obviously hinges on Grace's emotional attachment to Fran, because of course Fran is like replacing their deceased mom. And like, so of course there's gonna be, and she's the youngest and a girl. So like, there's a lot there to like where she's, and this is like, I think the first chunk of episodes where we really acknowledge like, oh, Gracie has like an attachment now to Fran.
Yes.
More than just like her nanny.
And I mean, I love these threads of this show. Like this
Same.
is, it's very heartwarming. It's a very satisfying thing to watch, like watching these kids kind of blossom and come out of their shells. And it was funny. I'm cutting ahead, but one of my favorite lines is when Gracie shows up to Fran's parents' apartment, her mother just leans in and is like, I forget what she leans in, she goes, oh, she's adorable. Do you want a scooter pie? Which I Googled, and that's like a New York based moon pie brand. And Fran's just like, that's your first question. like a 7-year-old appears at our doorstep miles from home, and you ask her if she just, wants a scooter pie.
One of my notes was I wrote down, really appreciate all of the Fran's mom that we're getting. I liked all of the Sylvia in this episode. I loved all of the Sylvia that we got. So Gracie shows up. She's run away from home. She's upset because of this thing that Cece said to her about how Fran's only spending time with you because she gets paid to. And then they sort of hash that out there, right?
Well, sort of. Well, no, it's just that.
Or they go to the wedding first.
Yeah. So the thing that kind of is like a very comedic setup is that they call Mr. Sheffield and he's like, oh, I'll be right there. And Fran's like, no. Like, we're out the door to a wedding. You have to meet us at this wedding in Astoria.
Right.
Which is just like, rife for some highbrow, lowbrow comedy.
Yeah.
And so indeed, like he had Cece show up at this completely over the top wedding reception where this was what I really reminded me of my grandma. Fran's mother keeps trying to make sure that she's getting her $50 worth out of this wedding because they had given, clearly the bride and groom like a check for $50. So it's like she's disappointed in the chicken. She wants to take home a flower piece because she thinks she's entitled to it.
That's my line of the episode is I love the line. She goes, Ma, she's holding this gigantic, I cannot describe how overly sized this like gigantic centerpiece table, like flower centerpiece thing is. And she's like, Ma, what are you doing? And she goes, why shouldn't I have a little centerpiece for my $50? And it's like, it kills me. Why shouldn't I have a little centerpiece? It's not little. And it's like, why shouldn't I? Just kills me.
And it's very much like, doing the calculus of how much money you have given and how much you should get back. And like, it is, I guess it's beyond a negative stereotype to Jewish people, but sometimes rings true to certain families.
I mean, it's very accurate.
I'm sure there's plenty of non-Jewish families where the same thing holds true, but I saw a little of my family in that.
I also love that Sylvia instantly hates Cece, like with no real prompting. She hates her when she first walks in, Cece, because she's gotten these like, I don't even know what kind of outfit you'd call that.
It's like a safari outfit.
It's not though, but like it is. It's like a fashionable one though. It's like a it's very expensive-y kind of one. And she walks in and Fran's mom goes, who's the park ranger? It's just great that she instantly hates her. And then another great Sylvia line is, so they get to the party and they get to the wedding and Gracie gets very emotional. She runs into the bathroom and Fran and Mr. Sheffield are looking for her. And she's like, Fran says, Ma, have you seen Gracie? And her mother goes, if she's 3'2" and not a Jew, she's in the powder room crying her eyes out.
Yeah, I have that exact line. If she's 3'2" and not a Jew, she's in the powder room crying her little eyes out.
She's just, man, give me more Sylvia episodes. I love it. I love her.
It was, really, really fun, like kind of set piece of this episode. Yeah. And I loved that the episode like culminates there. And then for me, it was really, really heartwarming because basically, like, once Cece and Mr. Sheffield get there, Mr. Sheffield tries to take Gracie home. And Gracie, being a little kid, is like, well, we can't leave. They're about to serve dessert and we're going to have schnapps. And, like, she's totally, like, in it in terms of this wedding and this party. And Mr. Sheffield's like, oh, but, it's Miss Fine's day off. And that's when Gracie's like, oh, so like you do only spend time with me because you're paid to. And that's when she runs off and, is crying in the bathroom. And it leads to like this moment where Fran goes in to find her and basically is like, she sits her on her lap and goes like, yes, I do get paid to spend time with you, but I don't get extra for loving you, which was really, really sweet. And then leads into a very, I thought, like solid moment where, Gracie comes out of the bathroom with Fran. She goes to dance with her dad and Fran like redirects her energy to Cece and like basically gives her like a look that will kill.
Death stare. Yeah.
Death stare. She goes over to her and starts with a little bit of pleasantries, but then goes, if you ever hurt my kids again, they'll be wiping your blue blood off the wall.
Yeah, which is a great line.
Yeah. And it's like, the audience is like, woo, and clapping. And it's just, you're like, go Fran. It's just, it was a very, very satisfying little exchange between them.
I wrote down Fran threatening Cece is legit. So, also, there was a line I just wrote down, I'm no Ivana Trump, but then of course neither is she anymore. I forget what Fran said that in relation to, but I laughed at an Ivana Trump reference.
God,
isn't it weird? It's so bizarre to think like what a joke that whole deal was for so like it was just he was a punchline and his family was a punchline and everything he did was a punchline. It's crazy. It was crazy to me. I was like, whoa, they made that reference like that. That was like still in the zeitgeist, but like
it's
nuts.
like that. It really makes you feel like you lived in the Twilight Zone for a while.
It really does.
Brings you
my
back
other
down
thing
to
that I
earth.
wrote down was, does this show pass the Bechdel test?
Oh, and for anybody who doesn't know, although probably most people do now, the Bechdel test, it's sort of like a feminist theory test, and it's if a movie, but I guess a show could also apply.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have more than one female character? 2, are they both named? And 3, do they have conversations about anything that's not a man, a man in the story,
or like a man in the equation, right?
Yes, and I think those are the 3 pillars. And I mean, it depends. Is Gracie considered, and like because she's a kid, is she considered like a quote unquote like woman character? Because she and Fran talk about lots of stuff,
right? Well, that's where I wrote this down, because I do think that Fran, when it comes to the kid characters, like obviously that passes, although maybe not as much with Maggie, like depending on where this show goes. I forget what the future episodes are, but so far all we've seen of Maggie is just like about a boy. And you know, we don't really see very many other female characters on this show, and when we do, the conversation is usually about like Fran and Mr. Sheffield, or her relation to Mr. Sheffield, or her job with Mr. Sheffield, you know?
I mean, we talked about this a little when we talked about the pilot. Like, there's a lot of things that lead into some stereotypes. But I do think Fran is a pretty well-rounded character, more so than I remembered, actually. She's much smarter, much stronger, and much less one-dimensional than I remembered.
Yeah, same. I remembered her much more vapid, I guess, and she's not really vapid.
Yeah.
Way, you know? What else you got for this ep?
Oh, well.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to quickly say that I think we ended up having to cut it out of the pilot episode for time, but you had made this really good point where you basically said you think that like in the cultural like memory for this show, everyone just remembers the voice and the ha, and that is overshadowed the really good writing, the fact that, you know, Fran Fine is a really funny, dynamic character. And I was thinking about that, you know, as we've been watching. I'm like, it's so true. There's a lot more to this character than just the sort of over the top, like, you know, gaudiness.
If I cut that out of the pilot, that was a mistake, because I love that line. I'm great.
Don't get used to me ever saying you said something that I cared about.
That was you. No, I mean, look, that's sort of the motivator for wanting to kind of keep doing this show, is that my memory of it was very much what you just described. And the more, when I watched the pilot, I was like, oh, weird. And then the more we've dug in, I'm like, wow, this is not what I remember it being. And then I started to question, like, well, why do I remember it that way? And like, I really think it's just because like that's what it was boiled down to in like media coverage and like, you know, talk show jokes and like, you know, SNL parody, and like everything just gets distilled to like it's whatever like the cultural agreement is of like it's like core, but like it loses all nuance. And so then like your memory of it becomes skewed, right? Like because we both misremembered what this show actually was like.
So it's like, that's pretty much the episode. It was, I really loved it because I really love anything that really focuses on the continued like emotional bond between Fran and the kids. And I loved the beginning when Fran like almost kissed Mr. Sheffield. It very much spoke to that, like, as you said earlier in an earlier record, like the heart of a rom-com, and they, you know, they are destined to be together, but we're keeping them apart for arbitrary reasons, and they are just extending it for literally years. And I love every time we get a little dose of that. And I almost feel like, unless you have more stuff to say, we can move on to our segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments. I give this episode 4 out of 5. So this is a It's not
That's not going to get annoying to people.
I was trying to think of the nanny appropriate rating scale. That was the best I could do in the moment. All right. Well, let's go to and now segments
with Shawn and Toria. It's so funny because I feel like we were like so high energy for the 20 minutes before we recorded. We were like giggling and giddy. And I feel like the second we started rolling for real, we just
you don't feel like this is high energy? I feel great.
I think I'm just hot. I think I'm just overheated right now. I closed the door to my room before we started recording.
Are you having a hot flash?
In case you guys forgot, we are Jewish people. But so, okay, we already did the Yiddish phrase. That was schmutz. And then here's a little nanny fact for you. It's not really related to anything. It's like apropos of nothing, which is interesting.
Perfect.
But so in Italy, where the show is broadcast with the title La Tata.
Okay.
Fran's name is Francesca, and her origins are not Jewish, but Italian. She was born in Italy and later moved to the U.S. to live with her aunt Assunta, which is actually the character of Sylvia. So I'm a little confused.
That sounds like an Italian remake.
An Italian reboot. Oh,
yeah. That sounds like they were like, oh, this is a great idea, but it would make no sense to Italians because they don't know anything about Broadway or Jews or the upper East Side New York or whatever. So they're like, let's just do it here in Italy, in Napoli, when love is free.
If they didn't do it that way, then that would have been some of the craziest dubbing I've ever seen to try to explain all of that backstory.
Instead of Mr. Sheffield.
Oh my gosh.
No, Mr. Sheffield.
I guess Tata is a nanny.
Yeah. Hey.
In Italian. Interesting.
Tata.
I also just Googled, when I was Googling this, I see people also ask, did the nanny marry Mr. Sheffield in real life?
Yes.
People are so stupid. Okay. And then, so like, the final segment is Fran or Cece.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us are the Cece, but I did say, and I said I would be the Fran because I love spending time with kids. And if anything, they hurt me. Like, I can't tell you how many times my little cousins like negged me over that last week, and all I wanted was their love.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love children. They don't really neg me though. But I do like I love my niece, and I can't wait to have kids of my own. I was so excited when our friend had a baby. Even though it was a surprise baby, I was still like, oh, that's awesome. Like instantly was excited. I was like, when can I see the baby? So, and then Elizabeth came home and I was like, when can we have a baby?
And she's like, I wish you were less in touch with your emotions. Slow your roll. But no, I love all the little kids in my family, and I want them to be my forever friends.
Yep. So 2 nannies this episode, no CCs. And that's it. That's the end of segments. And now I'll play the segments closing theme song. I'm going to add an opening and closing theme song.
Are you?
We'll see. If not, just imagine one. And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
That's an episode. Yeah,
that is just a bold-faced empty promise to our listeners.
Well, look, maybe they'll hear a segment there, or maybe they'll hear this hilarious bit that we did about a segment. I mean, a theme song. It's great.
Keep them guessing. Well, again, thank you guys for listening, and please subscribe and like on whatever medium you are listening to this on.
Yeah, and leave a comment if that's an option. Like, basically, the more you interact with it, the more other people find it, because that's how the algorithm works, and that's super helpful to everybody, because everyone needs to hear this podcast about the nanny.
Yeah, and of course, share it with your friends who enjoy The Nanny.
Or are a nanny. If you know any nannies, they might get a kick out of it. It might be relatable to them. We'll start talking more about child rearing too, just in case there's like some crossover there.
This becomes a child psychology parenting podcast by two shamelessly childish.
Childless.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be a great pilot podcast. Childish and childless.
Yeah. And it's us giving parenting tips.
Yes. People can call in. We're just full of ideas today, guys. All right, we'll let you go. You've got a big day ahead of you. We'll let you go.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.